and various other safety materials that are going to be required through these wonderful New York State regulations. The second portion to our initiative is to look at the whopping one center-based childcare facility that we have in Lewis County hand in hand. When we were working together with Jefferson County on this, it's kind of unfortunate that we have one as opposed to their 8, but obviously the population requires it. We're working on that. And so we were able to put kind of all of our eggs in this basket with hand in hand for this initial portion of it. So with the staffing program, the CAPC and the participating child care centers identified that a huge issue or barrier to them expanding to add child care slots is that they don't have the staffing. They're competing with early childhood education degrees that are going to teach at schools, right? So who's going to want to go to a hand in hand when they can make $10,000 more at Level Academy or River Central School? So they're working in competition with the school districts on a lot of their staffing. So without the staff members, they can't expand, and without the expansions, we can't add childcare slots to the county. So one of the identified areas of investment was to, for 1 year, invest in those 4 staffing positions so that can give them the funding they need to expand their programs. The second prong of that is staff retention programs. We were developing this in January of 2021, which was locally, like we were in the midst of COVID, right? So a lot of the data that we have is prior to COVID, so multiply that times like 10, and that's where we are now. So to help retain staff, we all agreed to provide the center-based child care center with funding to give their employees a retention bonus of up to $1,500 per year, and that's separated into quarterly payments. Fortunately for us, both of these programs are being administered by the CAPC for both Lewis County and Jefferson County. So they're heavily regulated, and they are going through the paperwork and filing all of the necessary paperwork with us before invoicing us, and they pay directly to hand in hand. We actually just signed the contract with them, so that'll be starting this month for 1 year. Okay, so we're hoping that that's helpful. So the next update we have, so past advancement. Like I said, we've completed the first cohort of the home-based daycare boot camp. The first cohort was funded by the Jefferson County IDA and our Lewis County IDA. They stepped in to get the ball rolling on this. I think that they started off with like 15 interested applicants to the program. They ended up with 8 who actually enrolled in the program. And we had 2 that opened childcare facilities, and that approximately 10 childcare slots, but obviously that depends on the age of the children. Another regulation that Dick knows all about, right, Dick? Mm-hmm. We signed up to be an in-home childcare daycare provider.
So get a note on that. It doesn't mean that we didn't create more childcare slots through this boot camp. It means that only 10 of those slots are officially registered in New York State.
Right.
See what I'm saying?
Right. Yep, because at the end of this, they help register, go through the whole licensing process and what have you. So there was a total of 8 participants, just to give you a scope of it. 8 participants that graduated at the end of this, 2 of which were from Lewis County, 6 were from Jefferson County. And the participants in Lewis County were from Glenfield and Copenhagen, so not even in the village of Wowville. They were on the outskirts, which was really helpful. And again, this is a program that other counties, regions are trying to replicate. To give you an idea, we've met with Oswego County, they're replicating it, and the model, and various others are looking to replicate it. Advocates for Children of New Jersey, we met with, it was the Adirondack Childcare, and that was Essex and Franklin County, they're looking to replicate this. And then the SUNY COSERA course, which is, I'll update everybody, that's what's coming off of the second cohort that's set to start. The new cohort that's planned under the current actions, the second home-based childcare boot camp, it's set to begin this spring. So I think actually this month, at the end of this month, early next month. Some of the improvements that's been made since the first original cohort is that there's a new streamlined enrollment and orientation process. They created a handbook and a toolkit, and they've provided more incentives like background checks and supplies. Those costs are going to be covered instead of having to go directly to the enrollee to pay. And then more one-on-one mentorship and professional services along with a COSARA course, which is an online opportunity. And as I alluded to, we are working with the CAPC to administrate 3 of the 4 county-funded programs. So it's not a huge administrative burden on our part, just my department, So we just funnel through those checks and approve them, and then Eric gets to cut them back to the CAPC. So future developments, I don't want to go into too much detail because a lot of it is progressing. Really, actually, there's a couple exciting projects, but we are exploring expansion of center-based childcare options. So we really don't want it to just be one hand-in-hand childcare facility in Lewis County, preferably more than one, or at least expand hand-in-hand's footprint to across the county. And then we also want to work with Naturally Lewis and our local employers to really bolster subsidy employment programs where benefits are offered to employees to take advantage of, like a subsidy, even if it's like an HA3 or HSA dependent care credit. So we're working on a few of those options as well.
So can I just to interrupt Cassie for just a moment on future developments? I think Cassie's being a little shy. We've made quite a bit of progress on recruiting another child care center to Lewis County, and those negotiations are ongoing. But Cassie and Brittany has been working with the hospital and my office as well, and there's a very good chance that we have successfully recruited another national agency to come here. So there's some great movement happening on that.
Staffing's coming from where for that?
They,
Up to them.
yeah, up to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, I don't want to give too much detail because we're still putting together the plans and I really don't want to jinx it, honestly. But really they're looking at proximity to the hospital because they really think that there's a huge benefit for those employees, which, I mean, if you're a nurse working the night shift, that's a huge barrier to entry for employment. And then Fort Drum, we're having those conversations with Fort Drum too to make sure that they have all the tools they need to be sustainable.
Would craft be in
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, that's in the future. Those are
Okay.
discussions we're looking to have with a lot of the employers. Yep. So stumbling blocks. I'll let Jenny really get into the meat of the lack of access for use of daycare subsidies through DSS. State regulations, those fun regulations that everybody likes to deal with. Home visits, you're really opening up your home for anybody to come in and pick apart, essentially. And limitations for center-based expansion, not a lot of extra property lying around for center-based childcare to fit within all those state regulations of where they can go and what they can do. Not only that, but it's very expensive and costly. But fortunately, New York State is sending money down the pipeline, or so they say, right, Ryan? To invest in our center-based childcare to expand that. And then the lack of employment-dependent care subsidies, which Brittany will fill everybody in on. So I will turn it over to Jenny.
Thank
Might have to
you.
stand closer. I'm gonna let you go.
Was that the first time you've ever been called shy?
Yes. Yes.
Maybe modest.
Just following up on what Cassie talked about earlier. So the subsidy programs are run by DSS, and those are income-based subsidies. But she mentioned how regulated it is to become a registered or licensed daycare. And I want to give you a concrete example that we forwarded to OCFS. We have a foster parent who is certified to take children in their home to live that couldn't make it through the registration process. It's harder to be a daycare provider than a foster parent. So that's how difficult it is. And we go in and we inspect everything for foster care. So I just want to put that frame of reference of how difficult that is. Now, we walk foster parents through our process page by page by page. But, so let's, put that in context there. So I don't know how many of you are aware DSS does offer childcare subsidy programs. And right now, eligibility is based on your income. You have to have a reason to need childcare. and the age of the child. Now you laugh, but
So
so think about it, looking for work, right? We use this for public assistance people, so they can go look for work, right? We use it in protective factors, CPS cases. So parents have breaks from their kids, or kids have breaks from their parents, right? We have foster parents, they work. Those kids need childcare. So all of those reasons, okay? All regulated by OCFS. We annually submit a plan to OCFS through our branch planning process that we have, and that gets approved, and there's about 12 appendices of what we're gonna cover. Do we cover overnight care? Do we cover travel time? Do we cover all these other things? And we've tried to make that as broad as possible because during the pandemic, our numbers have dropped. And statewide, the use of subsidies has dropped across the state. Think about it. A lot of people stayed home and worked remotely. Kids weren't in school, so childcare looked differently for a while. People apply directly through DSS, and I have a copy of the application here. It's not too awful hard. You don't have to come in and do an interview. You can submit your application. We call you on the phone. If you're missing some documents, we have you send them in. So, and we certify for a year at a time. Some counties do 6 months, we do a year. And then payments are made by DSS directly to the child care provider. So right now, the parent share of a person getting a subsidized child care slot is 10% above the household income. That's over 100%. So see, my regulations are crazy. Figure out what that is. But actually, 10% of their income is over 100% of the federal poverty level. So I will tell you, most people pay $1. I think monthly, the parent share in our county is about $170 total. Okay, so we're really talking people at the very low end of the economic scale. Parents choose their registered or licensed provider. And I missed this when Cassie sent this to me. We allow legally exempt. So we allow parents to pick grandma and grandpa that don't have to be licensed or registered. We allow them to pick auntie or uncle, okay? They do have to do some basic paperwork to be reviewed. They can't have, they can't have, parental rights terminated and things like that in order for us to cover it. But it's a little bit more loose, and I would probably say about at least 60-70% of our subsidy payments are going to legally exempt providers because there is not enough childcare slots, what we're talking about. Community action planning provides assistance to providers. And we do have a contract with CAPC as well for registration and renewal and inspection. Okay, so we pay them to do that. They have to do so many inspections every quarter. We get reports on that, and then we pay CAPC quarterly to do that work for us. As I mentioned earlier, right now, our program covers 24 absences per year, per kid, per provider, all right? Now, we only used to cover about 8 or 9, and about 6 months ago, I think I was here saying I want to do contracts with our providers in order to increase the number of absences we pay. The state changed the regulations about 4 months after that and said, hey, your minimum is now 24, so I now pay for more than I even thought I was going to. We can go up to 80 absences per year per kid, per provider. You choose them? Yes, we choose.
Jenny, what's an absence?
Kids out with COVID, kids on quarantine,
Okay. So
mom and dad went on vacation.
parental, it's not the child care provider.
Right.
Not availability.
Right, it is, the child's not available. So think about childcare, also about child well-being. And we don't want people to lose their slot for childcare because they got sick with COVID for 2 weeks. And then now the provider doesn't get paid, so they're like, I'm not gonna take your kid anymore. Or stuff happens, people have accidents, kids get sick. We don't want them to lose their providers, that's why we cover these absences. We do 12 months of eligibility. The thing legislators would like to know, I'm sure, there is no local share for our subsidies. We get a child care block grant. Okay, and our annual block grant is $242,886 in this
Did we
last.
spend it all?
No, and that's a problem.
That's.
And we have about $300,000 in rollover funds right now because we underspent during the pandemic. OCFS has convened calls almost every week telling counties, get more people to apply. It's not the application process. It is the lack of providers for where people can take their kids. So we're trying to figure that out. So just so you can see what the annual income would be to get a subsidy, it's not that big. A family of two, that could be a mom and a child, annual income of $34,840, right through there, okay? And depending on family size. And that's 200% of the federal poverty level. New York State, the governor has proposed a new budget to allow us to reduce the parent share from 10% to 1%. I think that's very likely. I think if that's an option, we would choose that anyway. We don't have a lot of people paying a parent share anyway. Increasing the eligibility from 200 to 300% of the federal poverty level and still be subsidy eligible. So if you look at those incomes, now a family of one is $38,640, not a family of two. Family of two is $52,260. And if I just read the one house bill in Albany, they want to go to 400% or universal child care subsidy.
The state was, when we were at NISAC earlier this week, the state had proposed $4 billion over the next 6 years, I think it was, for childcare. So that would be, people were kind of asking, okay, that might be actually more than what is needed. That's a lot of money.
So I don't know if it's going to go to 300% or 400%. In the governor's budget bill, we could go from 200 to 250 in 1 year and then 250 to 300 the subsequent year. Given our rollover funds that we haven't spent, it would make more sense for this county to push right to 300% of the federal poverty level. Someone like me always gets nervous. It was probably 15 years ago now. We overspend our money, right? And I hate shutting people off and saying, hey, well, you got childcare, but now I'm not covering it anymore. And we shut you off when we run out of funds. And we have to have a plan in an order of how we do that. Our current plan is we turn you off the longest user first. All right, yep, you gotta have a plan. So that's it for me. Any questions from DSS? I just wanted to add one thing about the boot camp and the two providers in the slots. None of them will take the subsidy. They won't take a subsidy payment, which is a shame.
Approximately how much is that subsidy that they would get per child?
All right, well, I'm glad you asked that. So we have a handy dandy chart here. And I brought it with me because it's so complicated. We pay a different rate if you're at a daycare center, a different rate if you're a family daycare, a different rate if you're school-age childcare. It's based on your age, your location, and then whether you're hourly, part-day, daily, weekly, or 7 days a week. So I can't answer that.
Is the center payment higher than
Yes,
the?
hand-in-hand payment is higher. So for some people, we have a large group family daycare. Her payment that we make to her every month is probably $6,000-7,000 for her. I truthfully, off the top of my head, I don't know what hand-in-hand gets. So the amount changes based on what the parent's income is, how long the kids are in childcare. And one of the other proposals in the governor's budget is to increase the daycare payment allowance to a higher level as well, which I think is long overdue. We really don't pay very well. For instance, one mom who has custody of a non-relative through my child welfare work. That child is an infant, goes 5 days a week, county work schedule. She gets $100 a week. Right? I don't know what you pay, but I'm sure it's superior to $100 a week.
My father doesn't take any payment.
So, yeah, it's not enough, so
But you
increasing
wonder,
the payment.
it's not hard to wonder why people don't want to accept
The subsidy is actually not bad. It is equivalent to what a lot of people charge. I've had 2 providers tell me they don't want to take the subsidy because they don't want to charge their other people for absences. So if you take the subsidy payment from us and we pay you for an absence, you have to charge the non-subsidy parents the same way. And they don't want to do that, right? Because they're babysitting for a friend or aunt and uncle, right? So that was 2 providers specifically told them that that's why they won't take the subsidy. They don't want to charge other people the absence. So CAPC has done a great job, especially in the boot camp, talking to people about this is a job. You're a professional childcare provider. You need to look at it as a business, not as helping the neighbor out. Look at it as a business. You had a question?
Yeah, the annual income, what do you use to base that on? Because like someone that works in the mill, they get overtime. How do you handle that?
Well, we look at what a monthly income is, and then we divide it by 4.33 is a way. So sometimes what we do is have people that apply in a month where their income is a little bit lower, maybe they didn't get the overtime. And then if it goes up the next month, it doesn't matter, we've certified you for the year.
Oh, okay,
So you only have to be eligible at the time of application.
thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, so we're gonna move on to Brittany, and she's gonna talk about employer subsidies, which is different than what I do.
Yes, thank you. Just to go back to what Cassie said, the IDA, and Ron is on our board, so thank you, Ron, stepped up to the plate last spring and quickly approved funding for the initial program. And I looked up what our investment has been so far. It's just approximately over $6,000. So a very, very low investment, and some great results that have come from that program. If you think about building a brand new childcare facility, think $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 to house maybe 35 slots. So relatively low investment for some great outcomes. So in the economic development world, we've been hearing this phrase thrown around quite often over the past few years. Childcare is economic development, but in this case, childcare is also workforce development. So we meet with employers on a daily basis, whether it be entrepreneurs just starting their business or our larger employers. And when we think about workforce, we really have to adapt to today's current needs. We need to recognize that childcare is an issue and it's a barrier to employment. Employers need to start thinking about childcare as a benefit, and they need to adapt to address childcare in different ways. So I want to bring up a couple of examples. Heard one this morning actually in a meeting I was in. A New York State employer realized that a lot of their employees were late to work every single day, and it really was a make or break whether or not they keep their job or not, because they had to put their kids on the bus or they were paying for childcare in the mornings to make it to work in time. So that employer said, why don't we just move the start time 1 hour? And that allowed all of these parents to put their kids on the school bus and get to work in time. So it may not necessarily be a monetary benefit. It might just be shifting the way they operate to meet the needs of families in our communities. And also in thinking about some of these subsidy programs that employers could offer, it could be direct payments or it could be a partial subsidy with registered daycare providers. So Cassie and I have been in discussions with a local school who is very interested in providing some sort of benefit for their employees. But it really comes down to, what they agree on and what works best for their employees. And I also want to go back 2 years ago. I was on the board of directors for Hand in Hand, and at that time, Hand in Hand did a survey to some of the hospital employees. And I dug out some of the survey results from January of last year to look at those numbers. It was a paper survey. It wasn't a large number of employees that were surveyed, but the results were pretty significant. So out of the 26 paper surveys total, 23 of them said that they have children and they need childcare. Of the 23, 20 of them indicated that family members or friends are watching their kids. So how are we supposed to attract people to live in Lewis County if they don't have family here to help watch their children. And of those 20 who have family watching children, 14 of them indicated that they or a spouse have passed up employment opportunities due to the lack of childcare. So right there, folks, it is a barrier. So some of those conversations need to continue to happen with, the crafts of the world and our larger employees. Maybe potentially the county could address some of these issues, the hospital, even some of our smaller businesses. All of our businesses have workforce needs right now, and addressing childcare could help alleviate some of those. We need to continue to work with center-based childcare on expansion opportunities, which we are doing. Continue to work with our employers and work with our home-based providers to accept the DSS subsidies that are underutilized, as Jenny mentioned. So I commend the Board of Legislators here for approving funding for childcare. It needs continued funding throughout the future, and I think the state has finally realized that. So again, thank you all for allowing us the opportunity to work with our partners to create these programs. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I went to a NISAC presentation on childcare as well, and they had a statistic that according to the federal guidance for affordable childcare, it should be no more than 7% of the family income. And they have the average cost of 2 children childcare is $2,000 a month, which is high for here. I don't think that, but in order for that to be 7% of your income, you would have to have a family income of $350,000. And that's at current wages for childcare centers, which are hemorrhaging staff. So it's just like, it's not sustainable. Yeah, Brittany, I thought what you brought up about changing culture around if you have to be late, the flexibility.
Like I said, it does not have to be a significant investment, but just simply changing the way they operate.
Yes, absolutely. Any other questions about childcare? Next we have Caitlin, to talk about the Employee Assistance Program.
I'll stand up. I don't have a presentation or anything. I'm just going to talk. I only have 5 minutes, and I know I'm being held to that. So, starting the clock. Okay. So, just a recap of our EAP services. Our EAP provider, which is Employee Assistance Program, is Mountain View Prevention Services. In 2021, last year, they met with employees 12 times. Which might not seem like a lot, but consistently over the years, that is an increase. And they did that through in-person meetings or phone contacts. Last year, mostly phone contacts, just given the nature of what was happening in 2021. Additionally, last year, they did lose their prevention counselor, and as with anyone, recruiting a new one took some time. So they did welcome a new counselor at the end of the year, and when they welcomed that individual, they brought us new pamphlets, new signage, new contact cards. So we were able to distribute all of those at the end of last year. So we're hoping to, really engage with them further this year with that new counselor to be able to get additional support with them. In 2022, we are putting a concentrated effort towards the mental health and wellness of our employees. So not only with our EAP, but also we've engaged and contracted with Lee Vance, who is a transformation coach and mindfulness trainer. So he's already met with a group of our Health and Human Services department heads, as well as a group of volunteer employees to discuss overall wellness coming out of the pandemic with our employees, managing expectations as we learn to grow as an organization. So really going through all of that, and upcoming, he does have 3 sessions scheduled for the end of March and beginning of April to introduce himself more to our employees. We're really trying to get our employees to attend those sessions to introduce himself, what he's here for, and what support he can provide our employees, a lot around work-life balance, stress reduction, and again, that growth, what we're looking for here. So that's kind of the focus on what we're doing with EAP right now. Questions? Okay.
On to spare.
Do it.
I guess.
Okay, now we will move on to dockets, Cassandra.
Okay, the only docket I have is authorizing agreements between Department of Social Services and New York State Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance with Lewis County Opportunities to serve as administrator of the rental supplement program allocation.
Discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Carried. And now, oh, that's it?
From the executive session.
I don't think so.
Motion adjourned.
Okay, thank you.
It's gonna be tough.
motion to approve them for the February 15th, 2022 meeting.
Bill.
Bill, second. Ron? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Minutes stand approved. We have a presentation to start off with. I guess everybody's here. Brittany and Cassandra on property cleanup project.
Right, thank you, everyone. Okay, so I am here. Sorry. So let's backtrack. I think last year, around maybe summer, fall, there was a presentation to the committee on, I think it was called the Property Cleanup Fund is what we were calling it at that time. And at that point, there was $1 million allocated from the ARPA funding to go towards some sort of property cleanup / revitalization fund. The program that surrounded it was still to be determined. Fast forward to now, myself, Naturally Lewis, and the county have worked in partnership to come up with a program, and we're calling it the Vacant Property Revitalization Program. So it has changed a little bit from its original intent. So hopefully it's something that we can all agree on, and really looking forward to hearing your input on this program. And I do want to talk about Naturally Lewis just for a little bit in the current structure that we have right now. So under the Naturally Lewis umbrella, we are the economic development agency for Lewis County, and we administer the services of the IDA, the Industrial Development Agency, that provides tax incentives, and also the Lewis County Development Corporation. And for the purposes of this program, the LCDC will be managing the funds for this. So what does this program look like for Lewis County? So Lewis County is looking to invest $2 million, and this is $1 million from the ARPA funds. And back last summer, fall, it was discussed that the county would put forth another $1 million towards this initiative. So Lewis County is looking to invest $2 million in commercial properties throughout our small communities. Through a public-private partnership, Naturally Lewis will work with private building owners to turn vacant and potentially unsafe, blighted, or hazardous buildings into usable spaces for businesses to create thriving downtowns and enhance our communities. So this program isn't just a fund. We're really looking to provide the support, the tools, and the resources to help turn some of these vacant buildings into usable spaces in our communities. So program details, this will be a one-time reimbursement grant towards making unsafe, vacant downtown spaces, or it could be individual floors. So we see that often in a lot of our downtowns. The first floor is taken up by a business, it's usable, but the second and third floors are vacant. They have structural issues. They just need some significant investment to make them usable. Funding will go towards construction costs and some soft costs such as engineering. It really depends on the project. We understand that each project is going to be significantly different. So we really have to come at this from not a one-size-fits-all approach, but on a one-on-one basis to really assess the entire project as a whole. So with that, funding will be open-ended and will be determined through a scoring matrix and by the Vacant Property Revitalization Committee. So again, unlike the facade and streetscape improvement program where we put that we would fund up to 75% of the project cost, we're not putting a percentage to it. We're not putting a number to it. We're leaving it very open-ended because we understand that each project is very different.
Do jobs need to be created from this?
That's something that the committee can talk about. We have yet to form a committee for this, and I think that some of those details could go into consideration. I know that when it comes to the scoring of the projects, if it's, if they are revitalizing a building to then create a business of their own or to market it to a business, I mean, yeah, some of that job creation could go towards that and how much we do fund a project.
Is there a base funding that you're looking for, or?
At this point, we're leaving it very open-ended because each project is very, very different.
So it could be $5 to 500.
Yeah, and it really will depend on the scoring criteria and what the committee recommends and the entire project as a whole. So I'll get to some of
I
that.
think there's a sample of the matrix.
Yes, there is. So I just want to reiterate that this is a program and not just a fund. So Naturally Lewis, with our partners such as Lewis County Planning, will work with the property owners on the entire project from start to finish. So we don't just want to provide the funding to make a project happen. We understand that there could be a lot of other factors involved and a lot of other resources that these building owners could utilize. And that could, some of those services include determining the feasibility of the project, business planning assistance, building reuse studies, which the planning department has done plenty of those, additional grant funding or financing. We have access to different pots of funding. Planning department has access to a lot of different grant programs, marketing of the building or the space to businesses and more. So again, it's the full program, it's the support, it's providing the tools to make these projects happen. So timeline and marketing of the program, we will accept applications on a rolling basis until funds are gone. So if we think about, in what time frame can we get the marketing up and running? April 2022, next month. Naturally Lewis will house the program on our website with an intake form asking questions on things like, the building specifics, the environmental concerns with the buildings, which we know we have a lot of those in Lewis County, and just the project specifics. Once we get that submission, staff will set up that initial consultation to really assess the project as a whole. And this is where we need help from you all, community leaders. I'm sure you all have a building in mind in your community that could use some funding, some support, but we're really looking for some of those motivated building owners. So we really need you guys to send people and projects our way. So this is the scoring and the funding portion that you were asking about, Phil. So the Vacant Property Revitalization Committee will score each project based on our custom scoring matrix. So some of you have seen this matrix last year. It does need to be updated to fit this specific program. But really, the funding will be based on what the score is. And the committee will assess the following items and score those items, such as the impact to the community, what is the funding need, what's the personal investment of the building or business owner, the timeline and the motivation to complete this project, and the project feasibility. We could add in things like job creation as part of the score as well. So then the committee will recommend those grant awards to the LCDC Board of Directors for approval. So looking at program oversight and reporting, so the Naturally Lewis staff will manage the program and the LCDC board will oversee the funds. Staff on the top and LCDC board on the bottom. You've probably seen some familiar faces on that board. It's a really great group of people, small business owners, really community minded. And of course, we will provide any updates to Ryan and any success stories to the board of legislators on an as needed basis. So next steps with the program, we really need to work on the marketing and the intake form. We need to create the committee to nail down the scoring of the projects and really the process and how we score and how we fund, working with Joan and attorneys on contracts, and obviously our marketing strategy. We need to get this out to the community that it's available. So with that, any questions?
What would you expand on you said it was gonna be a rolling program.
Yep, so oftentimes with grant programs, there's like a deadline, like submit projects by X date. We're just gonna keep it open, and it could take 2 years to get all the funding out. It could take 1 year, it could take 3 years. So we are just gonna leave it open, until the funding is gone.
So if it's front-loaded and you get good scoring, then you're gonna be dispensing the money sooner than later.
Yeah, and the committee will decide, and the scoring matrix that we will customize for this program, it will tell us, how much funding we should provide for that project. And again, in understanding that a lot of these projects are very different, like the bakery building in Harrisville will have very different needs than what's that building in Krogan?
The old feed mill.
The old feed mill. Like these are very complex and complicated projects. So we can't put like one number to it. We're gonna leave it to the scoring and the committee to come up with that funding.
And there'd be a minimum scoring to be included, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, if it's, and we wouldn't bring like a bad project to the committee. Staff's gonna vet the submission forms as they come in. But if we say, hey, the bakery building was submitted, this building owner wants to do something with it. Now we're gonna sit down and we're gonna assess what's the impact to the community? What type of business are they looking to put in there? What is the actual, construction needs? What are some of the environmental concerns? So all of those are gonna come into play when assessing how much we should fund the project.
So if the scoring is potential of 50, so to speak, and you got a 20, it probably wouldn't be considered.
Those are things that we need to discuss in the committee. We need to figure out what the threshold is.
Right. I guess that's what I was getting at.
Yes.
You will have a threshold at some point.
Yes, yep, and once we form the committee, we're gonna use the committee to help us determine that.
So Britt, what
Yes.
about Lions Falls School, is that inappropriate, would that be appropriate for this program?
Oh, what do you think, Brian?
Who even owns it?
Yeah, who owns it?
Well, we can pull it anytime we want off the tax.
So the Lions Falls School and what Joan's gonna talk about in a minute, the dairy property in Bremen, are an example of what Brittany was saying on the outset. We initially kind of thought of this money as deconstruction money, really, money to clean up, places throughout the county that, we're doing more harm than good, right? They'd be better off being raised or cleaned up and put back on the tax rolls. What we found through research, and we met with some folks that work with the land bank in Syracuse. We met with some contractor that works with the land bank in Syracuse. We, the more we thought about it, researched it, and tried to figure out where the rubber hits the road when it comes to these properties. At least for me, I think we came to the conclusion that we really don't have the infrastructure in place to take on those types of things. I mean, we've done one-offs with the LCDC, with the mill site, and there's others, that we could pick up, but in those cases, if we're gonna spend $1 million, you basically, you get Lions Falls School taken down and you might get part of the dairy site, cleaned up. In this scenario, we're hoping that folks that own, the buildings downtown that don't have anything on the second and third floor because they've never wanted to put in an elevator or fire suppression. And we're trying to think about a different approach when it comes to vacant buildings rather than the demolition. That doesn't mean, I'm still very committed to demolition. I think we need to do more of it. But the whole idea of trying to do it without a land bank gets a little bit trickier than I anticipated, I guess. Joan, do you remember that?
I do remember that, and there were lots of little complications that could come up. You get a contractor perhaps who's interested in taking on a project under the land bank, and then you hit some snag with environmental things, and it can mushroom. into a very high cost that somebody is not gonna be willing to invest all of that in, or you don't have somebody to market it to from the start, which is what a lot of the land bank, those projects had. They already had somebody interested in the property, and the land bank contractors were coming in to help make it all happen, and they had some subsidies themselves or something. So it's not an easy process. It can become very costly and unknown, but maybe some of those smaller projects within villages and towns and those might be a good place to start, to revitalize them. And, my concern when we first met with the person who, the contractor who had done some land bank work before, was making sure that we're not rewarding people who abandoned their properties for such a long time and they come back and now we're gonna fix them up for them? No, that shouldn't be what we want to have happen either.
So the issue, that was probably the most important issue, was a land bank-like demolition project would only be for properties that we can take via taxes.
Right.
So that would limit our ability to get this money out the door quickly because, okay, Lions Falls Mill and New Bremen, those are the other only two sites that we would want to clean up that are back on taxes. There's plenty of sites we want to clean up that are paying their taxes, but we would have to take them in their domain or something, and it gets complicated.
Or go in, if they've been deemed condemned, then we can go in and clean them up and put them on their taxes, but this is a different kind of.
So Brittany had to convince me, and I'll let her give the argument she gave me, basically.
Well, we were really looking at what's gonna be the most impactful use of these funds, what's the biggest bang for our buck. When I look at the cheese plant and the Lions Falls School, I feel like there are other grant programs we can take advantage of to tackle those projects. And in our office, we've launched a couple of programs where we've just seen a lot of success when you empower people to like be in the driver's seat, and it's not the government telling them what they should do with their money. So let's provide them with the tools and the support and the resources to do something with their building and make it an initiative, make it a Lewis County initiative and program. We're here to support you in your endeavors. We want to see these buildings, come back to life. Here's how we're gonna help you. So yeah, it's really about enhancing our downtowns, enhancing our communities, and just looking at it from a different way. I can think of a couple of building owners, off the top of my mind that would love to take advantage of these funds and would love to have maybe $200,000-$300,000 of support. And we're gonna help them find the rest of the funding if they need that help. So I think it's something we should try. If it's a complete bust, we at least try.
It won't be.
And hopefully it's not.
No, I guess I'm confused because, with respect to Lions Falls School, I would personally not want to see the present owner supported in any way. That would, I would think that would be pulled off the tax rolls and put into the LCDC's name. And, it could be as simple as cleaning the thing out and putting a new roof on it. I'm not sure that it needs to go to full demolition. So,
Thought he was a country.
Yes, an island unto himself.
he's moved his country to somewhere outskirts of Albany.
Oh, really? Okay. New country.
Hopefully he never comes back to the old country.
Oh, interesting, Ken.
So I don't think we've, the initial conversations about this portion of the ARPA funds was really about demolition. And we are, definitely changing the direction. So I do want to make sure we have board buy-in. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't continue to work on projects like Lions Falls and the New Bremen, center, but, we could spend all 2 million on just New Bremen and get it halfway done. Yeah.
Sorry. And that's a good point, because I like what's being presented, because it's spreading it more widespread than taking care of just one thing.
All right, it sounds like the program is headed in the right direction. Any other questions or anything for Brittany? Thank you very much.
Can
Thank you.
send that to me?
PowerPoint? Sure.
We only went over in time because Ryan got involved.
Good one, Tom.
Okay, next we've got Joan about the Lewis County dairy property update.
Yeah, that was a good segue, so I'm gonna be very quick. You may recall that we visited the dairy property back last fall. And just to give a quick update, we did get the EPA to go into the property back in 2019 and 2020. We had the assistance of Gary Bowich, who's an environmental attorney, who helped us get the EPA to go in. That property was owned by a company called Tubro, known as the Lewis Dairy Property Site. Tubro has not paid the taxes on the property since they were fined by the DEC a number of years ago for contaminating water with some of the whey and waste from when the dairy was operating. They only paid a $10,000 fine to the DEC, which I think was really the problem. So they walked away. The past due taxes are since 2012, and it's about $90,000 now that in back taxes that are owed. The EPA went in, they removed a lot of barrels and drums and some hazardous materials. They removed some mercury that was on the surface of some of the property, of the rooms. And some of the mercury had seeped into the foundation, if you will, where at one of the floor sites in the loading dock. So that was sealed. That was the best that the EPA could do with that. They claimed that they put in over $800,000 of mitigation and remedy to the site. But as we know from the visit there are some buildings falling down, and it's really an eyesore. At that time, we talked about the possibility of the county moving forward with the phase 2 survey assessment, asbestos assessment. And actually authorized me to work with the Dent firm to come up with an RFP for that. But that hasn't happened yet due to lots of other stuff going on. But in order for us to do that, we don't have direct legal access. It's really the EPA that has access. So what I would have to do is bring what we call a temporary incidence of owner motion to the court, which we did for the Syverson property, I believe it was, to get temporary access, legal access, and go in, and then we could have anybody who we have working on it environmentally go into the property and do the assessment. The board also did authorize an agreement with the EPA where we would agree with the EPA that if in the event we do put it back on the market, and we can sell it to someone, that the EPA would get 60% of those funds and we would get 40% of those funds, since they did put in a pretty substantial amount of money into trying to clean up the property. We tried to get the EPA to do another action on it, this phase 2 action on it, and the federal government just cut out that program, so there was no funding available to do that. So it could be a big investment, but I think it might be worth it to do the assessment and see if we can, how much it is gonna cost to clean up some of those buildings and identify where there's asbestos. And I'm glad Frank is here because he worked on this with me as well for 2 or 3 years. Did I miss anything?
No, other than the current, under the mercury that's still there
Yeah.
underneath that, there is a deed restriction on that.
Right,
So,
that would be, and that's part of the agreement with the EPA, that they would remove the county from being responsible for any kind of environmental matter having to do with the mercury that's left there, but we would give notice to any owner that that's there. They can't really do anything with that loading dock. If they do, they're gonna have to then mitigate and take care of that, the mercury problem. But if somebody knows that going in, I mean, that dock area isn't bad, so that might be something that they wanna keep.
So at this point, you have the authorization to do the phase 2.
Yeah.
It's just timing.
Yeah.
Do you anticipate doing it in the near
Yeah,
future?
so the first step will be the motion to the court to get the temporary ownership of the property, because it is in foreclosure. I mean, it's delinquent taxes.
And we don't have any anticipation of getting that $90,000, I assume.
Well, when we sell it, at some
Well,
point.
yeah, I mean, from
we
these
should-
people.
Yeah, oh, no,
Are they bankrupt or are they just gone?
they're around, but they just, one company I think is bankrupt. They have internal fighting between themselves and another corporation that they formed, and the likelihood of us getting the money from them is not likely.
So there's nothing you need from us right now.
Not right now, just wanted, to ask for an update on it, and that's where we are.
Thank you. For any other questions for Joan on this?
I will tell you, and I think I told the legislators when we were there visiting the property that day, that somebody who owns property behind it off of Cox Road is interested in the property, but whether or not that person is gonna be willing to make a big investment on this is not.
I think they were just interested in some of the land and
Yeah,
outbuildings, not the physical stuff.
right.
Yeah, that's it. Line first.
If there's no other questions for Joan, then thank you very much.
Yeah.
Next, we've got a bond update from Eric.
No comment on Joan being more than 5 minutes?
No,
I did my job, right, Tom?
Joan was fine.
There you
Thanks,
go.
thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
And I have 5 minutes, and Jerry and team are gonna jump in along with my presentation. And we'll let Ryan talk a little bit so that we can point it on him.
Well,
when we
you've
go
got
on.
extra time as long as Ryan got involved.
Oh, okay, then Ryan won't jump in. And we'll be good. So our topic today is to come back to you with, given both of our projects now have our construction bids in place, and give you an update on where we are gonna expect to go with the bonding for both county projects and the hospital projects. This is the county piece. Jerry or Jeff is gonna give you a quick summary on the hospital piece, and then we'll put the two pieces together and wrap it up as to the total. So hopefully this is relatively straightforward. I'll take you down the left column. First, the highway and DSS building, the facility bids came in at 15.9 million. We then have some additions to that to get to the total facility cost. So the contingency, the engineering and design, project management, and furniture and fixtures. The furniture and fixtures is an estimate. So 20,990,000 for that total highway and DSS scope of work. Ryan and I then discussed, we said, well, let's, as we're doing these projects, let's just put these next two things in here. You've been talking about these, you're well aware of these. So the DMV building, acquisition price is $430,000. The design is $200,000. Construction, very much an estimate of $1 million. So total for the DMV building, $1.6 million. The Glenfield School, acquisition price $315,000. Estimates for moving and for some renovations and repairs at $85,000 and $100,000, so a total for $500,000 for Glenfield. Definitely estimates on that one. I know Matt O'Connor and team have been in there almost every day this week. It's like some of the things we've been talking about. You go into an old building and who knows what you're gonna find. But anyway, $500,000 for that project. So we put those three together, we come up with $23,120,000 for our county building projects. Any questions on that? Okay, over the right side of the page. We talked about this, I think, maybe a month ago when we looked at all of our county reserves. So the reserves that we have that are dedicated mostly to the DSS and the highway. We started 2 or 3 years ago a facility project reserve. Last year we put a good amount of funding into that. So $2,072,000 we had in that reserve. A highway building reserve and a DSS building reserve, those go back a ways, but there are $485,000 and $210,000 in those two. So with those three dedicated reserves, $2,767,000. So we would, in theory, utilize those reserves, and my opinion is let's use them all. I mean, again, the highway and DSS have been on the books for years. Let's spend them. So if we've got a total cost of $23,120,000. We use the reserves, so that brings us down to a net of $20,353,000 that we need to pay for with money not currently reserved. In essence, to kind of round the number off, Ryan and our recommendation would be let's use $2,353,000 of existing fund balance to lower our bonding amount. I think, again, back to the presentation we made a month or so ago, we've got plenty of dollars in fund balance. I think that number is manageable. That would bring us down to a bonding amount for our county projects of $18 million. So I think if you have any questions, and then maybe, the big item there to make sure you're comfortable with is that use of our fund balance for the down payment.
Looks good to me. I was wondering about the 2.5%. Is that your feeling?
That's been my guess. The hospital team's gonna show you a similar analysis, and they also use 2.5%. I literally just reached out to our fiscal advisors today, and about an hour ago, they sent me an email back, and this is the bad news part of the scenario. They estimated 2.75. So unfortunately, if they're in the ball, if their number is accurate, we're both gonna be a little bit short on our long-term bonding costs. Just changes every day in the bonding market, I would imagine.
Eric, you also have it for 20 years. Any particular reason why?
That's what we said.
Yeah, I think that's where we were leaning towards. I think the hospital was looking at 25 years. Those numbers are flexible. We can work with fiscal advisors. We can have different time periods for our bond, the portion of our bond, the portion of their bond. We have been estimating our repayments on 20 years.
Personally, I like the 20 because that's, the two wind farms are 20. And that would be supporting this payment quite a bit.
Right.
Yeah. So that kind of dovetails into 20. Do you agree with that, Ryan?
I do, but there's some stuff coming down the pike on the wind tower stuff that we'll get into maybe next month.
I was wondering what that grin was, and it was more a sneer, I think.
Yeah, I don't want to say too much, it's too early, but we might have to have some difficult conversations going forward, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So.
We can do a quick recalc on the bond payment at 2.75%. I couldn't give you a guess as to how it's going to affect it, but
Well, it probably changes in 3 days anyway.
It could, it certainly could. You know,
At least
I mean,
you've given us a good.
Yeah, I mean, again, if everybody's paying attention to news, I would expect the change would be continued upward. When the hospital's done, we'll just come back to the total picture and the next steps. I'll give you, my best guess on the next steps as far as the process for the bonding.
Don't forget, just quick on that $1.1 million annual payment, don't forget that DSS, the state is gonna cover a
Right.
significant portion of that.
Right.
So our share that used to come out of our budget would be this.
Yeah, we've got an analysis of how we're paying for that 1.1 million, as Ryan said. DSS the state will cover a portion of it, the wind projects are covered a portion of it. We really don't believe, given the way we budgeted over the last few years, it's gonna fit within our annual budget without any impact.
Okay.
All right?
Any questions at this time before we move on to the hospital portion?
And
Thank
Jerry, we've got enough on the screen?
Not this one. I brought paper.
Michelle sent me
did you
something
put it
about.
up?
half
Is
hour.
everyone? Great. All right, it worked.
Jerry, I thought you'd have a Celtics tie on today.
Don't get me started, my friend. So thank you for your time. I started out with a 12-page presentation, reviewed it with Ryan and Eric, and as you might expect, Ryan gave me a call, and so he's really heard your guidance. He says, look, can you do something a little shorter?
So,
So,
right, well, once in a while he does something right.
so I've gone from 12 pages to 1. However, I brought it with me in the event you have a question that requires a little more detail, then we can dive into that. So I used the format that Eric did. So for us, we have sort of 2 projects built into one. We have the medical surgical revitalization, and you remember that is completely rehabbing med-surg and creating singles. Right now, most of our rooms are doubles, and we have 1 4-person ward. So the construction project bids, and I know a number of you were on the call, came in at $25.6 million. Our contingency for the project is $1.2 million. Engineering and design, $2 million. Project management, we're using CNS, and just shy of $700,000. Furniture and fixtures, 1.9. And incidentals are accounting, legal, those kinds of things. And I have a complete breakdown if you're interested. So in the aggregate, it's $31.9 million. So 32 has been our working number. And when in the fall, when it became clear because of supply chain issues, the initial project we had brought forward would not meet our construction project targets. You remember we went back and really went through this process of what are the essentials in our project and what would be the nice to haves. And an example of a nice to have would be a new boardroom for the board and 3 classrooms for the community. But it resulted in significant more dig because it would be, the first floor would be at ground level. And it would have an impact on the entire building. In so doing, we were able to basically cut over $7 million on the project, bringing us down to where we were originally pegging this project to be before the supply chain disruptions. So that's how we get the 31.9. Amount to bond 32. And once Ryan had kept me involved in your process, and our target was not to go above 50. So 32. And for us at 2.5%, 25 years, and 25 is the number we had been working with throughout the entire project, would be $1.7 million per year. So that's some mortgage payment.
Are you comfortable with that?
We are. We continue to work on other funding sources. We have a capital campaign that has been initiated, and the board has pledged some money. So the way we're designing this is to have the maximum amount of cash on the balance sheet and pursue these other funding sources. So for example, we've applied for a USDA grant of a sizable amount. And so we want to build the cash reserves. So how do we pay this back ultimately is the question. It's a combination of value in our critical access funding. For most of you, you've had the presentation on critical access funding, and it captures in our payment square footage allocated to the acute hospital. So we get an enhanced payment on our reimbursement. And that's how, in large part, how we're financing the mortgage.
Oh, good.
But the hospital currently carries zero debt. So an organization that brings in $85 million a year makes zero payments towards debt. So this is well within the percentage that, a healthy institution would have for debt.
Yeah, so thank you for that, Ryan. The team has done a great job working away at past debt. And so there aren't too many organizations our size who can say we are debt-free.
Jerry, I think I remember in some of the earlier conversations that you were expecting to pay it down by $5 million. That's gone away.
No, because of the cost of borrowing the money, we've decided not to take the $5 million out of our cash. So the board has made a commitment of $5 million. And because of the cost of borrowing versus the cost of having it versus the benefit of having the cash, I talked to Ryan about what if we finance the entire 32 and we're able to stay within the total bond that we had been working from.
When you talk about the cost of borrowing, you're talking about the rates being so low at this current point.
Correct. Now, if we were having this conversation next year and the interest rates continue to climb, that would be a different story.
Right.
Yeah.
And Brian convinced me of that it was the right thing to do.
And when we first met with bond counsel, it was 2%. So I think we're still in a place where it's advantageous not to use excess cash. And so that's the path we've been brought forward.
Okay.
Okay.
Any questions at this time for Jerry or anybody else?
So are we going separate paths on the bonds?
No,
No, it's all one.
it's one bond.
Right, so you authorized up to $50 million of bonding. We've been speaking with our bond counsel. There's two different pieces. Bond counsel is a law firm that helps us with this. Harris Beach is who we're using. And then Fiscal Advisors is a financing consultant that we've been using for years. We've met with them jointly a number of times. All of the bonding is done under our name, the county name. They are able to slice and dice a bond in many different ways. So we will go out for one bonding, but then again, they will structure it so that we have a piece and the hospital has a piece. We'll make our payments separately in essence. I'm not sure. It might all be one payment, but our payment will be calculated. The hospital's payment will be calculated. We can structure the term differently.
Okay,
So
that's why I asked, because we got the 20 and the 25,
right.
but we still can do it all in one bond.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they do that, but
We don't care as
no.
long as they can, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't think either of us magically came up with these calculations, but at the hospital's 32 million and our 18 million, guess what? That
Oh,
is
don't tell me you did come up with that.
Did anybody manipulate those numbers? No, so we're right at $50 million.
Ryan wasn't involved in that. was he?
No,
I didn't think
Ryan
so.
stays, believe it or not, Ryan stays out of all the accounting, man. So,
Nobody else runs that.
our bids on both projects, our bids came in great where we expected. When you add on the additional cost for the project, that's where we are, is right at $50 million. So that will be our expectation. We go forward at that. I need to look back at the time frame I received from the bonding consultants, but we're going to be moving forward basically next week. I have a phone call with them on Monday. We need to give them this final number. And then I think within a week or so, they need to have those last pieces in place, and then they will start to move forward to complete the actual process. I think they told us by middle of April, 20th of April, things would be pretty much ready to close. Again, I'll have to double check that schedule, but
So we don't have to, we authorized the 50 million, we don't have to do any further actions.
you know, this is the first time I've done this in a long, long time, if ever, but I think from the board's perspective, we're done. You've done your authorization. The resolution stated that it's in the treasurer's hands to complete the process. Again, we work with the law firm and the fiscal advisors to do that, and
And we have you on record as saying the taxes won't go up.
Budget
You said that earlier.
Budget officer.
I agree with that.
So, yeah, things are, again, the dollars came together, right where we expected, maybe, again, would have hoped a little bit less, but, and everything, I think, as far as I understand, all the approvals are in place, and we just work with them now to move the process along. I'll keep you updated on that for sure.
Very good.
So just to be totally accurate, the board approved the hospital to bond up to 33 million back in 2020. And then the board approved the counties, for the county's projects, up to 22.5.
Right.
So the county's doing 18, the hospital's doing 32. And that's why we're at 50.
Yeah, good clarification, John. I think we've talked about 50 million for a long time, but the actual approvals were more than that. I just did a quick recalculation on the interest rate for our piece. I have it at 1,150,000. I showed you 1,102,000. So that interest rate could be a $40,000 change per year for us. So that's not great.
So my question to Ryan is, we've talked about a lot of other projects, railroad, possibly supporting double play. If we bond 18 million for this, are you comfortable that we have excess cash to do the other projects that we talked about?
Definitely, because the projections that I've been bringing to you guys, I think it was even just last month, we did another financial update of the county's reserves. We were making those calculations based on a $20 million bond. So at $18 million, that puts us in a good position. So in fact, because the bids came in low at about 16 million, our cash, similar to the hospital, the cash that we're outlaying from our reserves is less than even what we had originally talked about. So we should have plenty of cash on hand through our fund balance and our capital funds to do these other projects.
Yes, I think, I'd have to look back at it, but I think a month ago, we talked about reserves. I think we showed you, and I don't remember if this down payment was in there, but we showed you about $11 million of available reserves. So let's assume we're gonna pull $2,353,000, we'll pull that out of the 11 million. I think to Larry's question, we must still have 7.5, whatever the subtraction.
So we have plenty of money to fund community development.
Yes. Yep, we do, in my opinion.
And it would be worth noting, we have scheduled a groundbreaking for April 20th, which is a Wednesday, for 10:30. So a lot's gonna happen here quickly. We're finalizing the contract agreements with the various contractors that will be working the project. And you'll start seeing, the bulldozers, the backhoes, and the trucks, and we're gonna start moving some earth, and the steel beams will be ordered, and, so it's gonna be a pretty exciting period.
Can I
Along
come?
with your project, it'll be a good summer for Lewis County, I think.
Can I come to the groundbreaking?
You are all invited, yeah, and we'll make sure you get an invitation, but I wanted to, and we'll have some shovels and you can participate.
That'll be great.
I'll bring my own underhat, I got plenty.
All right, any other questions or anything for the bond situation?
Dick's got a question.
I got one, but I can't read that chart right here, but I'm assuming it looks like we're funding basically our bids
are we then saying any change order or items like that, we're gonna fund out of our existing fund balances and stuff?
They have a contingency underneath the contract bond.
On both contracts?
Yes,
1.6 on ours, it's.
and 1.2 on that.
1.2 here.
Okay, thank you. I couldn't see that. Anything else? All right, thank you very much. Something was brought to my attention, it's not on here, and I don't know if you can come up right now or not. Candy, did you want to have something to?
I don't know, Brian, I need to go over that now or next month,
What are we talking about?
State law.
state law on the solar and wind.
Oh, we've got a meeting, a call with, the attorney that we've been working with all the way back to 2002 or 3 when the first wind project came in, Kevin McCullough. We've got a call with him hopefully tomorrow. We're trying to get scheduled. There has been a change in the way that the state is directing town assessors to calculate the value of green energy projects. They're basically giving a formula for how wind and solar should be assessed. As you can imagine, that formula is less in many cases than some of the agreements that we've made. So it's too early to jump the gun, but we do need to start talking to attorneys, and Brittany and me and Candy and Cassandra and Joan have all talked, but we need to probably circle the wagons a little bit more before we are prepared to go too much in depth, but I guess that's all I'm comfortable saying at this point.
It was brought up, so I just thought we, other than that, we'll move along to dockets.
The first docket is awarding bid to and authorizing agreement with ACC Technical Services for the county's communications networking equipment system upgrade project in the amount of up to $158,883.93, plus $135 per hour for consulting services.
Any questions or comments? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
The second one is accepting funding and appropriating funds in the planning department for the New York Mainstream Downtown Stabilization Project in the amount of $64,000. And I believe that Cassie Buell, the planning director, would like to comment on that.
Yes, so we have an update on this. We received the bids for the last portion of the project on Tuesday. As expected, they were higher than the original estimates that we applied for the grant funding under last January, just higher than we had anticipated. So this resolution is appropriating the matching funds that the project owner, Tug Hill Artisan Roasters, was required to supply us with. The total grant project was estimated at $252,000 and some change. The county was awarded $188,000, and the project owner, the project sponsor, Tug Hill Artisan Roasters, had to pay us the $64,000. So that's what that was. Basically accepting the payment that we've already received in our treasurer's office from Tug Hill Artisan Roasters, so we could add it to our line in the budget to pay the contractors out of. But after going with number 4, docket number 4, after we received the bids on Tuesday, they are higher than what the anticipated project scope, or not scope, the project amount was, based on the estimates from 2021. So they will be sending that $64,000 will increase by roughly $114,000, but that will not be covered by Lewis County. That'll be covered by the project owner, Tug Hill Artisan Roasters. They will send us a check prior to making the final authorization at the April 5th meeting.
So there's no county cost in that
No,
project?
there's still no county cost. Nope. But we just wanted to make you aware that that amount will increase because we will be getting another check from the private owner to pay for the difference in costs.
For $113,000 more.
More.
Right.
That's basically what
Yep.
everything went up.
Yep,
It's almost, it's 177 or 180,000.
Yep.
that
Okay.
The property owner's gonna have to put in.
and it was a combination of procurement costs increasing and the removal of the vermiculite, which is asbestos in the attic of the roof. After they removed that, they uncovered more damage to the roof that was seen in the beginning with the estimates. So once that vermiculite, which is just a ton of little granular pieces that were insulating the roof at that point, once that was removed as part of the asbestos abatement, there were several large holes that were identified in the roof. So now the rafters need to be replaced.
All right, thank you very much.
Yep.
Very good.
Anybody have any questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried.
Awarding bid and authorizing agreement between the County of Lewis and Accessibility Solutions to furnish and install elevator for public building under the New York Main Street Downtown Stabilization Project at a cost not to exceed $57,856.
And again, this is for the
Same
building.
project.
Questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried.
Awarding the bid and authorizing agreement between the County of Lewis and to be determined for roof, elevator shaft, and facade repairs construction work at 7514 South State Street, Laval, under the Downtown Stabilization Project at a cost of to be determined. And I believe Cassie also
Yes.
would like to comment on this.
Yeah, same scope. We're awarding the bids that we received on Tuesday, which is Heritage Masonry out of Syracuse. They bid 184 and some change on that. So
You're okay with them? They were considerably less than the others.
yes, they were. We're actually doing another site visit with them tomorrow to go over everything. And then I wanted to bring Ward in too because they wanted to just make sure codes and everything was all ready to go when the contract was awarded.
Generally, you're okay with the company.
Yes, I'm good with their bid. I mean, it was the only two bidders, so we didn't have a lot to choose from, but there was a $70,000
Yeah, it was a big gap.
difference. So, again, we're doing a
$65,000.
follow-up just to make sure that all the Ts are crossed and Is are dotted there.
And I believe, Cassie, you know that this company had done some other rehab project? Was it American Heritage or am I thinking of another?
Yeah, I think you might be thinking of
There's
another.
so many of them.
Yes. Yeah, playing off of that vacant building rehabilitation thing, a lot of we really want to promote infill development. We want to restore historic properties. And luckily, knock on wood, we received the clearance report from the asbestos abatement, which was half the battle because nobody was going to touch that building without the funding to cover that asbestos abatement. So we're halfway through. So, but those are the sorts of things that pop up it could pop up with the vacant building revitalization projects. Yes.
All right. Any other questions on that one? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried.
Accepting CARES Program Award determining CDBG project number 636 CDHR 50-22 constitutes a type 2 action under SECRA with a negative declaration and appointing the Planning and Community Development Director as a certifying officer.
Questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried.
Setting the second public hearing for Lewis County Manufactured Housing Replacement Program under New York State CDBG Project 636 MH 353-19 for May 3rd, 2022 at 5:00 p.m.
Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Do you have anything else?
Yes, we did want to do a quick executive session to bring the board up to date on labor negotiations.
Can I get a motion to go into executive session? Joe, second. Jeff? All in favor? Aye. And we'll go to executive session.